me introduce first YEVGENIYA Kaganovich. She is a Belarus-born artist based in Milwaukee. Her hybrid practice encompasses jewelry and metalsmithing, sculpture, and installation. She has received a Master's of Fine Arts from the State University of New York at New Paltz and a Bachelor's of Fine Arts in Metal Jewelry from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. She has exhibited her work nationally and internationally and has received a number of awards and has been published widely. She has worked as a designer goldsmith at Peggy Robinson Designs, studio of handcrafted jewelry in Evanston, Illinois, and has taught metalsmithing at Chicago State University and Will Street Studios in Chicago. And currently she is the professor and chair of the Department of Art and Design at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, teaching in a thriving jewelry and metalsmithing area with a graduate and undergraduate degree program. So now it's my pleasure to turn it over to YEVGENIYA Kaganovich.
Thank you everybody so much for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. It's been a fantastic week here. I want to thank John Lashudo for having the vision for this project in the first place, and a really particular vision that I really appreciate. I want to thank you also for persevering through a difficult installation process and your patience with that. And in general, your vision for the gallery and what's going to be happening here, I think what you and Anna are doing is incredibly exciting and significant and an enormous asset to the institution. So thank you for all of that. Thank you everybody who worked on the show. Annika, the students, it's been really, really great. And I also want to thank designers for supporting this particular project, and Alex for supporting the students at this institution. It's been really great spending some time with people who believe in public education in generally, and also believe in education in the arts in particular. It's been really inspiring. Thank you very much. So, can you guys hear me okay? Do I need to use a microphone, or are we all right?
Okay.
I can't compete with John in the ways that I project, but we're okay without the microphone? I can't quite see.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Great. So as John alluded, I have this really extensive jewelry metalsmithing background. And so you may be surprised by the work that's in the exhibition and the work that I'm going to talk about tonight. But all of it is informed by my training in jewelry metalsmithing, my interest in craft and crafted objects, my interest in wearability and the body. I'm very much aware of my privileged position as an artist in academia. And I owe the understanding of what it means to be an academic to my mentor, my William H. Gray. As an academic, I feel that it is my responsibility to make speculative work that attempts to move the discipline forward. I need to contribute to expanding the understanding of the applied tradition and challenging its existing boundaries. So with that kind of agenda, my work is developed in 3 distinct but related directions. Sorry, for some reason not advancing here. There we go, okay. So sculptural body extensions that display a psychological condition defined by corporeal body. Jewelry that explores cultural and social functions of adornment. And installations that attempt to locate the human experience within architectural and social constructs. I think of objects I make as sculptural body extensions that display a psychological condition, and as projections of mental habits and bodily knowledge. I attempt to address the complexities of interpersonal and social interactions conditioned by the corporal body. I explore the absurdity of our attempts to express, perceive, communicate, and understand. The idea with these pieces is our longing for communication and the absurdity of our attempts at it. I render them in organic terms, drawing on receptors that plants or sea creatures would have. I was thinking about these as if someone who feels self-conscious, uncomfortable, and awkward would wear or grow these, kind of like that third eye in the back of your head, that extra receptor you always wanted. But of course, once you have something like this, it really just amplifies the problem. If you have it on, now everybody is really looking at you. And so I wanted these to look shy, embarrassed, and a little bit pathetic, kind of like awkward, like a part of the body that's not supposed to be seen. As an object maker, I'm really interested in the art experience residing in the object itself and not in the performance of the documentation of that performance. I want the body extensions to point to the utility of the human effort and the difficulty of being. I strive to create objects all in one way or another tangential to the applied tradition, whether it's through process, format, performance of later, or material, and locate them at the point of the body as a site of exchange. I made a series of eyepieces, investigating the difficulty of perception. I envisioned them as solidified gestures and physical reminders of the hybrid experience, as residues of our ways of operating in the world. This piece is simply about trying to look too hard to understand. It's mask-like, it extends the gaze of the wearer to the point of almost touching the very thing that it's examining. The eyes open up into large cups that are filled with nylon wires that are meant to look like they act as sensors or receptors, exploring the idea of looking at something at a microscopic level. Through its similarities to a carnivorous plant, like a Venus flytrap, it examines the idea of devouring the object examination with the eyes. In a way, it's this residue of a desperate effort to understand, or a failed effort of perception, which becomes completely obvious when the piece is put on. The soft latex just kind of makes the pieces flop to the bottom, revealing the impossibility of trying to make sense and rendering that very attempt to understand as absurd. The abundance of receptors in this piece actually obscures the wearer's vision and makes them into a spectacle. I moved from using the hearing and eyesight directly and made a series of hand pieces. This one was crocheted out of steel. This one was fabricated out of copper. And I started wanting to leave more loose ends and not to complete the condition of what these objects were. I became really interested in fusing kind of the specimen and the artifact qualities within a single piece. So it would be almost impossible to identify the objects. Did they come off the body, or are they meant to be applied to it? Are they tools, brushes, sensory interfaces meant to heighten an experience? They kind of appear to be vulnerable, aggressive, and fragmented, thus self-contained. The surface is also frustrating. It's not clear what side you're supposed to be looking at. I strive to create objects that are ambiguous in their nature, their functions hindered, their origin unclear, and their use frustrated. I render them as tools and outgrowths, as devices and organisms. These dualities result in hybrid objects that hopefully allow for multiple readings within the work. When working on the next couple of series, I really became obsessed with white. I thought of the white pieces as kind of a residue or a ghost of a gesture, or a template for an experience, or a blank for an action. And so the white really ended up kind of a nightmare to maintain. It all got dirty. If you looked at it, funny, but it really got at the sense of the objects being these residue or something left over from an experience. This piece was rendered as a mask that received extensions that suggested some kind of function. And then these are some of the extensions. I constantly negotiate the role of function within the work. I see function, whether it's actual or implied, as a point of access for the viewer and an opportunity to evoke meaning. In many of these pieces, the function is simultaneously suggested and denied, resulting in objects that is essentially self-defeating. In this next series, I wanted to explore the difficulty of communication. There are a series of mouthpieces, and they look like devices that may enhance or amplify speech, but upon closer examination, the viewer finds out that that exchange is hindered or altogether impossible. On one end, there's an impression of a face, so it's clear that that's where your mouth would go. It's really important to me that the work exists on the scale of the body, and whether that variability is actual or implied. I want the viewer to be able to at least imagine putting it on. By presenting the objects as a kind of trace of the body on actual scale, I want the viewer to relate to the futility of the human effort. These objects hopefully look like what it feels like to desperately want to communicate and not be able to, or to attempt to understand and fail, or to feel urgently vulnerable to the point of becoming aggressive. The other end of this piece opens up into this large funnel lined with closed mouths. All of the pieces are kind of obsessively made, and that quality partly resulting from the attention to detail that's demanded by a craft discipline. But really, the overall intent of the repetitive action is to bring a sense of futility and absurdity of that process into the work. So there's kind of an irony to fusing hundreds of little pieces of fishing line together or poking hundreds of steel pins through a thin latex surface. So I sort of employ those specific procedures to heighten that sense of urgency. I want to distill objects that serve as a reminder of an anticipatory psychological state. I attempt to create fictions that precipitate our own reality and experiences, rendering those as unreliable. By pointing out the conflicts and dualities in our existence through these bodily objects, I hope to encourage both introspection and outreach. I spend a lot of time experimenting with the context in which these pieces are seen, as it directed the understanding of that quite a bit. And so some displays that I played with were more clinical, where the objects were presented as specimens. And I've experimented with kind of building individual displays for each one of the pieces. Other modes of presentations were all kind of more scientific rather than clinical, and presenting objects as artifacts as opposed to specimens. And with other displays, I tried to make it a little bit more ambiguous, retaining both the clinical and the scientific presentation modes. So with this exhibition, I built these table tray card things on casters to house each one of the objects individually. The height of the bases was such that the viewer would think that they can walk up and work with or on these objects. I made a series of black pieces, with some of these you can see in the exhibition. I thought of the white pieces as these sort of ghosts, or ghosts of a gesture, or a template of an experience. And so the only logical thing to me after making some ghosts was to make some shadows. And I was trying to work a little bit more intuitively on these, giving them very specific, alluding to very specific function, but removing some of the more direct bodily references. And then came these balloon mouthpieces, which are seemingly self-sustaining, but ultimately these closed-off, self-defeating systems. I was really excited about the shift in the scale of the objects, even though the relationship to the body was still one-to-one. So these pieces are rendered as respirator masks with straps to make the devices look believable, and by that, to make the viewer think, why would a device like this exist? Wonder how they would use it, and what would it feel like to use it. The double balloon mouthpieces, this piece has masks attached to each end to give a promise of some kind of absurd interaction. And the mask salute to scuba gear. Even though all the function elements are there, it's not quite right because of the softness and the flabbiness of the rubber. This is a prototype for a number of subsequent installations. These pieces are inflated with helium, elevating the mask to the height of an average-sized person, and they're tethered to stanchions. I've gotten this piece outside, and I was really interested in seeing how the elements would kind of activate it, but I was so really focused on getting the piece filled with helium, which is all the helium I had at the moment, through the wood shop, through the loading dock, and out on the bike path. I sort of completely overlooked the fact that I was taking it out of this art environment and into a public sphere, which made changed the concepts completely and made people understand the piece really differently. So as soon as it was out on the bike path, there were people on the bridge asking me what it was, and people riding their bikes and stopping. The best one was this guy riding his bike with his kid, and he just kept asking, "Is this science or art?" And I said, it's both. But it really made me think about how the environment is contextual, and so I started wanting to work with that. So there's a couple more shots. I don't intend for my work to be funny. It's ironic, unsettling maybe, but there's always these kind of funny moments. I had to wrestle the balloon back inside and save the helium, and I won. But it always ends up there. We had some comical moments during the installation trying to get helium out of one balloon and into the other, and good thing there's nobody around to watch it. It's kind of hilarious. So understanding that the environment is contextual, I installed this piece for a faculty exhibition, but not in the gallery space itself, but in the lobby of a theater building, which is this highly trafficked area. And in the public space, people tended to really perceive it as a functional scientific device and trying to engage with it continuously. So very differently from how it was perceived in the gallery. As with all of the work in the series, it orchestrates the viewer engagements through specific directives. So the height of the mask, the stanchions open to one side, and vinyl footprints on the floor. I was asked to do this large-scale installation in Michigan, and so shifting the scale of the objects significantly, again, while still retaining the relationship to the body. Exaggerating the size here, these pieces were kind of really towering over you, created this tension between the opposing presence of the object and the minuscule detail that was created by the bodily imprint. Because of the exact indexing of the body, the object is quite specific in how the viewer is to engage with it, but the purpose and the implication of the interaction are quite uncertain. Does the viewer supply the object with breath, or does the object supply the viewer with substance? The exchange is carefully orchestrated, but it remains kind of ambiguous. The resulting object is unsettling, unclear, a little bit threatening, definitely self-conscious and necessary, while the viewer acts upon it, whether the viewer acts upon it or acts upon the viewer, that engagement is compulsory. My work shifted quite significantly in respect to function after encountering an exhibition called Design and the Elastic Mind at MoMA, New York, and reading the writing of Paul Antonelli, who's the curator for this show. She discusses critical design, and she argues that critical design does not always lead to useful objects, but rather to food for thought. Its usefulness is related to its capacity to make us ponder how we really want our things to fit into our lives. I think in general in good design, the meaning is formulated through use. And in related practices of craft and art, use can be an opportunity to develop a critical language around function as well as to elicit meaning. And I see my work sort of paralleling Paul Antonelli's view on critical design in a sense that it doesn't always lead to useful objects or art objects or craft objects, but rather to objects that provoke thought. I want to make objects, the use of which signals and facilitates particular ideas about our existence, our experience, as in these double mouthpieces. Because of the absence of the straps, the only way to use the object is for two people to stand in very close proximity to one another, kind of wedging the objects between their faces, which of course can be uncomfortable or even suffocating. So these objects beg engagement between two people only to reveal the difficulty of it. The physical challenges of using these objects uncover the social discomfort with such proximity. I have rendered these in porcelain, and it's really shifted the character of them quite a bit. So there's a number of pieces made in that material. So I've been focusing on the implications of function, its possibilities and potential as a rhetorical device. In my earlier works, the function was suggested and immediately denied, resulting in an object that was dysfunctional. Now I aim for the function to be transformative, not simply self-defeating. I want to make objects that through their actual use comment on aspects of our existence, our experience, our bodies. It's important that the work is not read as sculpture to be observed, but it invites the viewer participation, whether it's actual or imagined. It's through this engagement that the purpose and the implication of each piece are considered. This piece, for example, has two masks that are attached to a hollow tube. On each end, the nostrils are open, which makes it possible to breathe into the piece. Two people share the finite amount of air within the piece in their lungs, kind of urgently connected and kept at a distance by the device. This piece is aesthetically really similar, but functionally quite different. There's an inflatable volume in between each pieces, in between each masks. The openings of the mouths are equipped with a one-way valve, one in each mouthpiece, so that the air, sound, words, whatever goes and mixes in the balloon does not come back out. A kind of psychological distance is created by the complexity and the awkwardness of engaging this object. So there's also quite a bit of a gap between the work that you're seeing and my current project, and so I thought I would try to fill that in really quickly for you. While objects I make mark the body as a site of exchange, in installation, I attempt to locate the human body within the architectural and cultural constructs and consider our existence or our effect on them. Inhabitant Fest is an intervention into the usual interior architectural space of the Shannon Glenn Wilson Center in Brookfield, Wisconsin. The center's art gallery is kind of this really nonsensical architectural space. It's carved out with rectilinear shapes and columns and nooks and alcoves, and there's sort of like a slanty ceiling and a flat ceiling, and it sort of looks like a lodge. It's just this really kind of nonsensical space architecturally. And the site-specific installation that I created for it is the system of seemingly interconnected, inflated latex volumes that intervene with the building's regular anatomy. They originate in the limited sections of the horizontal ceiling and then project down in various stages of elongation and inflation, and then drop down to spread into all of the niches in pools of these semi-translucent forms filled with egg-like volumes. The installation appears to be an organism with its own internal logic that responds to the specific architectural elements, such as the niches that you're seeing here, columns, and corners, embracing the architecture of the building as its habitat, while simultaneously rendering these seemingly stable structural elements unreliable. We only see a fraction of this organism and might wonder how much of the rest of the building it pervades. Although the surface of the latex may appear strange and unfamiliar, we kind of can't escape the notion that we're somehow responsible for this organism's existence and how it might be related to us. Is our breath holding it up? Did it come into existence from traces that we leave behind on matter that we touch and pass through? Are we connected through this organism to the building, and do we also kind of inhabit and infest? Inhabit and fest suggests another structure for the center, and one that is only partially revealed to us. The skin-like volumes that seem to go through as well as around the architecture of the building confuse biology and architecture, space and circulation. Inhabit and fest implies that the center is more than an edifice for art and culture. It is a living organism that we are to a part of. As soon as the piece was up, it immediately started to react to light, temperature, and airflow, just like an organism might. So the surface really changed. Some forms developed bulges in unexpected ways, and some shriveled up. And so this artificial thing started to have a life cycle, kind of like an organism, and required tending to. And so that regular reinflation, repair, and cleaning remind me of tending to a garden or a pet. And engaged ideas about life cycles, development, and disintegration, which I wanted to take further with the next piece. This installation project, called Strange Vegetation, is a response to the decorative interior of the Villetiers Decorative Arts Museum, specifically the Zubair wallpaper with the exotic plants, as well as the flora-based ironwork by Cyril Kolnick, which percolates the museum. Both the wallpaper and the ironwork are much more about culture than nature. They are these cultural constructs of nature, and so the object engages that as one of the ideas. The site-specific installation responds to the uncertainty of the decorative arts and the architectural interior of the institution. So here it's a system of physically interconnected, identical plant-like forms made out of latex. The individual bulbs extend upwards from the floor, reaching from below the surface, from below that painted horizon line on the wallpaper, so kind of seemingly originating underground. With the aid of electronics, the system is activated through a regular inflation and deflation cycle. My longtime friend and collaborator, Nathaniel Stern, wrote the custom software that's responsible for making the piece breathe. And so this artificial organism has a life cycle of its own and requires tending to. It stands in a symbiotic relationship as well as in opposition to the decorative floral interior. It seems to be an extension and a mutation of their interior, and it invades this space that it shares with us, while its artificial life cycle is at odds with the exotic flowers that are always in bloom on the walls. Originating and confronting its habitat, it kind of threatens its surroundings as a potentially unchecked parasite. Strange vegetation engages questions of sustainability and life cycles, development and disintegration, and suggests that built environments are vibrant matter with the capacity for their own movement, change, and agency over time. Okay, here we go. So if you guys can see it, you can hear it. The volumes of inhaling and exhaling. They pause and then exhale. And you'll hear the limbs flop on the floor. There we go. There we go. So that brings me to the end, to my current project, Grow, which is a series of durational installations in a number of public buildings throughout the city of Milwaukee and surrounding areas. At each location, a system of interconnected plant-like volumes grow over time. The whole installation is made out of plastic bags. We use plastic bags as single materials, and the layers of plastic are fused together. My screen looks completely different now. Okay, as long as you guys are looking at something. The layers of plastic are fused together, then molded into these plant-like volumes, and are crocheted together with plastic bag thread, and then stuffed with plastic bags, creating these objects that are made out of a single material. You use plastic bags. There are official plastic bag recycling bins at each one of the locations. I'm not looking at what you're looking at all. Okay, so there's these recycling collection points at each one of the locations. that I periodically empty and then process those materials and add onto each one of the organisms. Like weeds, the organisms grow into unused and overlooked spaces, niches, corners, stairways, and other very much peripheral architectural elements. The object itself launched at the Linden Sculpture Garden in October 2012, with subsequent plantings throughout the city of Milwaukee in multiple locations. It also has a public component, which ranges from people participating in public workshops, which we do once a month at the Linden Sculpture Garden, to simply bringing plastic bags or coming and talking to us about the project. So sort of change from tending to this organism to tending to a community. At the culmination of the project, all forms will be transformed back to Linden for final installation, and which will be determined at that point by the number of forms created and how they've developed. But there will be a final installation with all of the forms, probably after about a period of 3 years, so within a year or so. My goals with this project were to transform this artificial manipulated material into a seemingly unchecked, feral, and opportunistic growth, to try to visualize and punctuate reuse by juxtaposing it with this very slow, methodical making. So you can very much see that even though my practice is hybrid, it's very much informed by my training in applied tradition. I feel that because I'm trained in applied tradition, I have this capacity to utilize the formats, materials, and processes that are relevant to the applied tradition, therefore being able to engage some of the ideas that are also inherent to craft. Ultimately, all this resulting in a hybrid practice. I'm pretty sure we're out of time. So thank you very much.